This week in the astrology, it's all about communication, and there's not too much going on this week, but we do have Mercury making a sextile to Jupiter while it's in Gemini, and we do have Mercury conjoining Chiron, and this kind of leans over to like having to have conversations that you need to have, being communicated, something that is actually going to be kind of nice to hear, even though it might be a little bit bittersweet. And there's a lot of big, lofty ideas. So even though this week doesn't have that much going on, I usually like when the astrology is a little bit more chill. It gives us a little bit more time to get grounded, to get our heads together before, we get into more bigger astrology once we get towards the end of May. But anyway, let's go ahead and get started talking about it. Welcome back to the Astrology Report, this time for May 5th through May 11th of 2025. My name is Cam White. If you don't know me already, I'm a professional astrologer, and I was waiting for you guys to finish what I was saying, but I let you know what's going on in the astrology and how to best use it to optimize your life. So anyway, like I said in the intro, the three highlights that we have this week are going to be Mercury making a sextile to Jupiter. We will have Venus making a sextile to Pluto, and we'll have Mercury conjoining Chiron. And then the rest of this week is pretty chill. So we start Monday off with the moon in Leo making a square to Uranus. Mercury will make a sextile to Jupiter as the highlight for Monday, and then the moon will ingress into Virgo. So the moon makes a square to Uranus like first thing in the morning. So early morning disruption. Don't know what to tell you about that, but if you're expecting things to go smooth on Monday morning, there's going to be some sort of a disruption that might bother your ego a little bit, and you're just going to have to work through that. But we do have Mercury making a sextile to Jupiter. Now, I really like this. However, I've recently come to the conclusion that Jupiter in Gemini sucks. Like really fucking bad. I cannot tell you how. Like when you even look back at the beginning of this year, where it was like Mars was in Cancer, Venus in Aries, Jupiter in Gemini, Mercury in Pisces, just everything was in detriment and fall, just everything fucking sucked. And Jupiter in Gemini, I feel like sucked because again, this is like, if you haven't watched my Jupiter in Gemini video, go ahead and watch it, because something I talk about is Jupiter's about faith and belief and optimism, and it's in the sign of like rationality. And you can't be optimistic and hopeful and faithful when you're leaning too far into like having to have it all make sense. And what's funny about Jupiter and Gemini is like you can try your best to not do that way, but like that's just what the energy is. So it's difficult, right? And so what I do like about, Mercury being in Aries is it's very blunt, it's very forceful, it's very quick with the way that we're thinking. Mercury is starting to move very, very quickly, especially as it goes into Taurus. But Mercury sextiling Jupiter is big, lofty ideas, thinking in a very fast and accelerated way, bold ideas. But my issue is it's Jupiter in Gemini where, look, we all have a billion ideas, but what are the ones that we're actually, are these ideas distractions? Are we playing small with them? Are we, using these ideas to cope with like things that we should be focusing on, but we're not focusing on? So that's the thing that I kind of look at is like, well, that might be a little bit bad, but I will say Mercury making a sextile to Jupiter is going to be really good for communication, right? This does look hopeful. This does look better for communication. And that's something that continues into Tuesday, which we'll talk about. But then after Mercury makes a sextile to Jupiter, we will have the moon ingress into Virgo. And the moon just going into Virgo, I think, is being a little bit more analytical with things. And I say that with a pause or hesitancy, because the moon's going to be going towards the south node. And, with everything that we've got going on in Virgo, it's just not all of that fun. And something that I think is interesting as we get ready for Jupiter to go into Cancer here in a couple months, the moon going into Virgo, Jupiter being the moon going into Virgo and conjoining the south node, and Jupiter being in Gemini still. It's like anything that has to do with, analysis or rationality, it's just like losing energy. It's not working all that well. And I think there's going to be something interesting about the moon going into Virgo where we want to be more organized and we want to be more detailed, but that being I don't want to say like troublesome, because the south node is just like exhausting and draining, where it's like you can't move forward until you take care of these things. And these things that you like need to take care of, whether it's what you need to organize, what you need to do, they're not inspiring in any way. But then we get to Tuesday, and on Tuesday we have two highlights. We have Venus making a sextile to Pluto. We have Mercury conjoining Chiron, and then we have the moon while it's in Virgo making a trine to the sun in Taurus. So number one, there's two things I'd never talk about. Number one is I'd never talk about Chiron, and I never really talk about the moon making an aspect to the sun. But let me just first go over Venus making a sextile to Pluto. So this is our third and final Venus-Pluto sextile. Look, I get a lot of heat in my comments of people when I say I don't think Pluto transits matter all that much in the grand scheme of things, especially something like a sextile, to be honest with you. And a lot of people get really worked up about that, and I don't know why. What I like about Venus making a sextile to Pluto is if Venus is morning star, and we've had this whole reevaluation of what we want. Pluto, makes the big things small and the small things big. And it's just one of those things of like, I would really look at your situation and what are the things that you are doing that, for other people might seem really, really daunting, but for you, it's not a big deal, versus for you, what is a really, really big deal? And other people might not think that that is a big deal to you. That's something to kind of like look at and see what kind of power is in there. Or another way to look at it is, what are these smaller things that you are making a bigger deal out of, for better or for worse, right? Like, are you making a small deal out of something that, are you making a big deal out of something that is small and that's inhibiting you from moving forward? Or are you, able to make a big thing into a small thing that helps you move forward? And it's a sextile, right? So there's some sort of help when it comes to this. It's just one of those things of being able to discern what you're actually doing is being helpful versus harmful. And I don't think that's always clear cut with Pluto. So Venus making a sextile to Pluto, again, Venus is like, what do you want? Pleasure. She's in detriment. So it's kind of like, the ability to receive what you want is not that easy at the moment. You have to kind of like take it. And Venus sextiling Pluto might be like, again, these small little things that you, being able to take these small little things or being able to like feel a little bit more empowered with it is easier. Although, again, at the end of the day, I think what's more important to me is Venus, morning star, just about to leave shadow in Aries, more than I'm looking even at Venus sextiling Pluto. But this comes back to Mercury conjoining Chiron. And this is kind of why I went into the title of this video, which I'm not sure which title we're going to pick, but Chiron is like this wounded healer thing. I don't really talk about Chiron all that much. I think too many people put too much emphasis on it. And the reason I get, upset when people put emphasis on like things like Chiron is the same people that put emphasis on like the vertex or like these really small things. They also ignore and they diminish the bigger things, like a Saturn conjunction to something. Like they'll ignore that, but they will totally look at a Chiron conjunction, and that just totally flies in the face of like everything that astrology is. But the reason I'm talking about this is Chiron is this like sensitive point. It can be very healing and very, sensitive. So again, the way I like to look at it is if you got an open wound, a cut, and you need to disinfect it, whether you're putting iodine or, hydrogen peroxide, whatever the hell it is, there's going to be some stinging to it. There's going to be some pain to it, but that is what is required to take care of it. Now, Mercury is about communication and ideas. And I would really emphasize on the communication part of there being some sort of communication being brought about, whether you are explaining something to someone is telling you something, there's some sort of letter in the mail, an email that you get that is sensitive, but it's for the greater good. It's something that you don't want to deal with, but that needs to be taken care of. And once it is taken care of, things will start to be better. And I think that's just going to be something that you might interpret as bad at first, but as time will go on, you will look back at, be like, you know what? I'm glad I went through that. So Tuesday's kind of interesting with that. And the other part of Tuesday is the moon is making a trine to the sun. I don't really talk about the luminaries making aspects with each other like this just because it's not the biggest thing, but I do like the moon in Virgo and the sun in Taurus, where there is this, even though there's a lot of fire and air energy going on right now, there's a little bit of a feeling grounded on this day, on Tuesday. It's very stable. It's very chill. So Tuesday is, I don't think all that crazy, even though it is the day with the most highlights. Now we get to Wednesday, and on Wednesday, the moon, while it's in Virgo, is first going to make a square to Jupiter. It's then going to conjoin the south node. It will then trine Saturn and then go opposite Saturn. Oh, my bad. It will trine Uranus, then go opposite Saturn. So the big thing with this is the moon in Virgo making these transits before Saturn goes into Aries and Jupiter goes into Cancer is so frustrating to me, because the moon being in Virgo, right? We want to be particular. We want to, it's kind of like when you have like anxiety, like you just want to like organize everything and touch everything. It's squaring Jupiter and Gemini, where you get overwhelmed at your to-do list. You get overwhelmed with everything that is in front of you, and you're not really sure where to start. The moon is then going to conjoin the south node. Look, it is really the north node's in Pisces right now, where there's just a lot of like, hey, you kind of just have to wing things. You kind of just have to go in the direction spirit is telling you to go. And the moon conjoining the south node is you sometimes have to let go of control. Sometimes you're not going to have everything organized the way that you want. Sometimes, something I've been thinking a lot about with Saturn and Aries is a lot of these next few years are just going to be having to make do with what you have. And I think that's going to be challenging because we live in a world where we're always fixated on needing more and wanting more and having access to that instant gratification of whatever it is that we want, but having to make do with what we have. And the moon conjoining the South Node is just like, okay, you're not going to get, everything off your to-do list. You don't even, have you ever tried to make a to-do list and you can't remember everything that you need to do? So then you feel like you're missing something. That's also the feeling of the moon conjoining the South Node. But what's interesting is like right as the moon conjoins the South Node, it then makes a trine to Uranus. This is like oh my gosh, I remember this. Oh my gosh, I remember that. Maybe you go to the grocery store, you get everything, you feel like you forgot something on your list, but right as you leave the grocery store, you remembered something. But after the moon makes that trine to Uranus, it then goes opposite Saturn. The grocery store is now closed. There's this, Uranus is about liberation, freedom, like inspirational ideas, instability. And the moon making a trine to Uranus is typically fun. Like there's this, oh my gosh, I got this idea, or oh my gosh, I feel this way, and that's exciting. But then the moon immediately starts to go opposite Saturn in Pisces, where there's resistance to it. There is a block in the way. There is you're not going to be able to do that in time, or, you have this list, you forgot something on your list, you finally remembered something to put on your list, but no store has it around you. That's kind of the feeling. So I think Wednesday is emotionally turbulent. So if you're one of those people that can just get exhausted with your emotions, just try to, remember on Wednesday, the moon's going a little bit crazy, and try to just like calm yourself down. Because I think it's going to be an emotional roller coaster on Wednesday, even though I wouldn't call it the worst emotional roller coaster. I would say, though, that it is a little, up and down throughout the day. So then we get to Thursday. And on Thursday, very early in the morning, the moon ingresses into Libra. It will then go opposite Neptune in Aries and opposite Venus in Aries. And then it will make a trine to Pluto. And then the moon is sextiling Mars throughout most of the rest of the day. So the moon going into Libra, I still don't exactly know how I feel yet about the moon's transit through Libra as it's hitting Venus and Neptune and eventually Saturn in Aries. Because the Aries-Libra dynamic is like, without war, there is no peace. Without peace, there's no war kind of a thing. It's like the individual, the relationships, how do we balance things? And the moon going into Libra is, I think, as we have all this fire and air, a lot more fun, a lot more exciting. But as it goes opposite Neptune, again, confusion, overwhelm. As it goes opposite Venus and Aries, a little bit more confusion. Have you ever joined a new social circle and you've tried to learn the social dynamics of this group of people, and it's very just having to watch and learn, or it's just weird to navigate at first? I feel like that's kind of the energy. Now, the moon will make a trine to Pluto, whatever, but the moon is making the sextile to Mars throughout the rest of the day. And what I do like about Thursday is there is this fun energy going on, although it is still it's not really all that clear. And as the moon sextiling Mars in Leo, there is this, the thing I wrote down was people kind of gassing you up. Mars is in Leo, the actions that we're taking, energy, drive, fights, conflicts are all coming from the sense of pride, the sense of, individuality, being seen, being witnessed. And the moon in Libra making that sextile to Mars, I made a Instagram reel about this, about people are going to be struggling with being seen. And a lot of people struggle with being seen, not wanting to post something on social media because heaven forbid people see you, or whatever it is. And that moon in Libra transit making a sextile to Mars in Leo is there are going to be opportunities for people to recognize you or put you somewhat in the spotlight that might make you feel really good, and vice versa, you being able to do that for other people. So there is something fun about Thursday, about relationships and inspiration, feeling good, a higher vibe, and you recognizing other people and their accomplishments, and them recognizing yours. So Thursday's just it's fun, although in the morning it starts off in a trying to test these new waters kind of an energy. And then we get to Friday. All day Friday is just the moon making a trine to Jupiter. I really like this time in the astrology where, sure, Jupiter's in Gemini and it honestly fucking sucks, but Jupiter is at the last degrees of the air signs, and because of how everything's set up, there's just a good while where the moon is applying to a trine with Jupiter all day. Use that as much as you can. Sure, Jupiter in Gemini is not functioning all that well, but there is this, Jupiter is the greater benefic. Jupiter is about expansion and hope and all this fun stuff, right? The moon making that trine to Jupiter is elevating that mood, elevating, again, yourself, especially when it comes to your emotions, your day to day. You're having better relationships at this moment. That's inspiring you. You're getting more information from that. There's a lot of Friday that is just really good. I will say though, your social batteries will be drained. The like moon in Libra, Jupiter and Gemini is like too many people, too many relationships, maybe you go out on Friday night and that's the socializing that you get for the month, if that makes sense. And then we get to Saturday and oh my gosh, Mercury does go into Taurus this week. I was like, there's another fucking highlight this week. And I was looking and I didn't see it. Mercury goes into Taurus. Holy shit. I forgot about that. Okay. Mercury goes into Taurus on Saturday. That's our highlight. And then the moon goes into Scorpio and goes opposite Mercury and squares Pluto. So Mercury going into Taurus, I think for the watery earth sign people, you will like Mercury in Taurus. For the air and the fire sign people, like Mercury going into Taurus will be more helpful than not. We have a lot of air and fire energy that's very caffeinated, that's very extreme, that's very loud and obnoxious. And so again, for the water and earth sign people, this might be a little bit too loud and crazy. For you, Mercury in Taurus might actually make you feel a little bit more nourished and grounded again. But what's nice about Mercury in Taurus is it's not as like quick and fast as, Mercury in Aries. It's a little bit more of like, how do we keep things stable? Like, I think of things like logistics, because that's what Mercury rules logistics. And Mercury in Aries is like, how do we go about this and go about that? And Mercury in Taurus is like, how do we just keep it consistent? How do we keep this energy, consistent as much as possible? Now, what's funny is Mercury flies through Taurus. Mercury's in Taurus for like 2 weeks. Like, that's it. But Mercury goes into Taurus and it's a little bit more of settling our mind, getting a little bit more grounded, being a little bit more fixated. And I will say, Mercury in Taurus is very stubborn. I feel like Taurus is the most stubborn sign. All of the fixed signs are extremely stubborn. And that brings me to the next thing, which is the moon ingresses into Scorpio and goes opposite Mercury and squares Pluto. There's going to be some emotional distress. The moon will go into Scorpio where the moon is not feeling all that good. We are getting ready for the full moon in Scorpio. And the moon in Scorpio is just like our emotions are feeling like, like when you read a text message you don't want to read, or you get an email that you don't want to, like there's some sort of like a fear or a panic part of it. And I've always related the moon in Scorpio feeling like when you're leaning back on a chair and you're just back on the 2 legs and you slightly lose your balance and your stomach just drops. That's what the moon in Scorpio reminds me of. But it goes opposite Mercury in Taurus, where our emotions are like having a battle, like a standoff with our thoughts and our mind. And that could be related to other individuals in your life. Like how we feel is going against the information that we have. And the information is just the information. There's no fixing or changing it. But the way that we feel about it is going to be very obnoxious, if that makes sense. We'll be a little emo about it, a little sensitive about it. So I think on Saturday, there's some emotional distress and there's some stubbornness to information that you're getting or having to slow down. And you're just going to be kind of throwing a fit about it. And then the moon is going to make a square to Pluto. Like, it's going to be, do you remember being like, again, young or a kid and like, your parents do something and you're like, this is the worst thing ever. And, you get all upset because you're a kid and that's the worst thing that's ever happened to you. And it's really like nothing. You can't even remember what you were like angry about. The moon making that square to Pluto is going to be challenging like your ability to like not get overwhelmed with emotional distress and not let these small things really like, metastasize into these larger problems. And after the moon like leaves that square with Pluto, I think things chill out a little bit, but I think there's a part of Saturday that is just a little bit frustrating. Okay, actually when we get to Sunday, we have to have the moon make a square to Mars. That's the only thing going on Sunday is the moon making a square to Mars. And this isn't that great. I don't like I think Scorpio, like the moon's gonna be in Scorpio making a square to Mars and Leo. I think these squares are really funny because they're just like, Scorpio is willing to burn it all down and Leo's willing to like, make a show out of it. So there's this like really big conflict of egos going on here. And the thing is the moon is on Sunday, as the moon's in Scorpio making a square to Mars and Leo, be really careful. Like it's going to be really easy to be upset, to be emotional and to lash out. And you're going to have to really actually try your best to not make it blow up into something. Especially with your pride. I think everything's just going to be frustrating on Sunday. And that's really it. Like once the moon leaves that square with Mars, it's not really all that bad. But Sunday's pretty frustrating. And that's like, that's this week. Next week, we have the full moon in Scorpio. Venus finally leaves shadow, which is really exciting because now we're actually moving forward with everything. The Sun conjoins Uranus, and Mercury squares Mars, which is also just another frustrating transit. So I would say, like this week, I think a lot of it is positive at the beginning. There's a lot of communication and ideas that are very, very helpful. But as we go throughout the week, I think things just get kind of emotionally frustrating. But again, here's the other thing with the astrology, guys. These are just lunar transits. These are just day-to-day things. In the grand scheme of your life, the day-to-day, as important as it is to be stable in your day-to-day, this isn't the biggest deal. So don't act like this is the worst week in the world, because it's not. It's just going to be an emotionally turbulent week. And again, your job is to recognize that, understand what your triggers are, understand what's going to upset you, and understand how you could be the bigger person in this, because you watch my videos and you know that this shit is going to happen. So I'm going to leave you guys off with that. Thank you so much for watching, liking, sharing, subscribing. I love and appreciate you guys, and I'll be seeing you next week.